It seems insignificant compared to the losses suffered by the bombing victims, but thousands of runners in last year's marathon were also robbed that day. After months of intense training and with 25 miles behind them, some 5,000 people were denied the chance to cross the finish line. Many of them will be back on the course this year, including a young runner who's determined to complete the race in honor of her mother. WGBH News reporter Anne Mostue has her story.
Diane Bassick was just a casual runner. It was something to do in the summer when she wasn't busy teaching kindergarten in Natick. But then in 2012, her mother was diagnosed with lung cancer.
I thought, there's nothing I can do to cure her. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I can't do anything physically to cure her, but I can help those who can.
Bassick applied and received a Boston Marathon bib number from Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. She raised $5,000 and spent hours running after school and on the weekends. But then, a month and a half before the marathon, Bassick's mother died.
When my mother passed away, my training was interrupted. I didn't have it in me really to do much of anything. To get up in the morning was a struggle, and that lasted for a while, but slowly you have to get back to reality and back to work, and it was her who gave me the inspiration to keep going.
So Bassick kept running. Her students became her living support and inspiration, especially on Marathon Monday. She pre-planned a spot to meet them at mile 10.
Those kids meant the world to me. They were my saving grace last year. They were the greatest source of joy in the lowest point of my life.
It was a memorable experience for the children, too, like 7-year-old Sonoma Caruso.
I saw her and all my friends gave her a hug. I cheered and clapped, but it was kind of really hot, so my hands were getting tired.
And Bassick was tired too, but persisted, running over Heartbreak Hill even though she often walked while training. But then, at mile 21, she was stopped by police.
My gut instinct said, "You're gonna what? You can't stop me. Like, do you know how long I've been running? Do you know how long I've been training? Do you know what this means to me?"
Bassick was stunned. She worried about her brother at the finish line until they connected by phone. Still, she couldn't rest easy.
Crossing that finish line was my way of honoring Mom and closing the book on that difficult chapter. And what happened last year at the marathon opened up another book. And this year, to me, running and crossing the finish line is going to be closing 2 books.
Diane is gearing up to run on Monday with support from her students, cheering her on again. For WGBH.
All right. My next guest has also been supporting Diane's marathon goals. Jack Fultz has served as the training advisor for the Dana-Farber Marathon runners since 1990, and he's well qualified for the gig. Jack won the Boston Marathon in 1976. Welcome to Greater Boston.
Thank you, Emily. Great to be here.
Gotta ask, what was your time in 1976?
It was 2 hours, 20 minutes, and 19 seconds.
Wow. What are they down to now? Like 208, 207?
Well, even faster. Several years ago, with a massive tailwind they ran 2:03:02, the fastest marathon ever run. Now, it doesn't qualify as a world record because Boston's considered a favorable course. But my time that winning year, it was a little warm that year. It became known as the run for the hoses. 96 degrees at the start, so it slowed us down a little bit, and we all came back and ran fast.
Jack, how did you get involved in Dana-Farber?
Well, it's a long story, but way back in 1989, a kid who I had coached when he was in junior high school, he was now a freshman in college, and he lost his best friend to brain cancer. He'd been treated at the Jimmy Fund Clinic at Dana-Farber, in and out. And so this young friend of mine, Mike, went over to the Jimmy Fund to see if there's something he could do to memorialize his friend, and he met a marathoner that was working at the Jimmy Fund. They decided to run the marathon, and he contacted me, asked me if I'd help them train for it as I had done when he was younger. And I was working for the marathon at the time, but I said, absolutely, I'll do that, and I was able to help them get into the race. They ran the race. He raised a lot of money. They had a good, positive experience. One and done. He memorialized his friend, and he thought, okay, that's it. I'm out of here. Well, the employee also knew some trustees at Dana-Farber who saw this whole concept and said, you know, maybe we could expand on this. Get some of your friends to run next year. We'll give you a challenge grant. At the same time, Sidney Farber's grandsons, who grew up in the area here, walked into another door, Dana-Farber, about the same time, and wanting to do something running related to get to raise money for their grandfather's institute. And the perfect storm was basically created. So that year, 1990, we found 19 runners, some running as official runners, some as bandits, ran the marathon, and they made they met the challenge grant of $50,000 that Dolores and Wayne Weaver had set up, and that was the year 1990 that we were born.
Well, how's it going to work now, Jack? Because you referred to bandits. These are people who are unofficial. They jump in the race at the end. Not only does the BAA frown on that, they're not going to allow it. I mean, they're going to just be cutting those people right off. They're not going to allow them to go. And you can't just hand anyone a bib. There was a day where you could. If you were a Dana-Farber runner, you got a bib. Now, don't you have to still qualify to do it? Not by virtue of time. That's the best way to get into the race. But all the people are on charity teams, for the most part. We have maybe 40 to 50 people that come with their own entries by virtue of qualifying, or they know somebody who won the sponsors or something like that. But the other 500 on our team on most years get their bib numbers from us, and the BAA gives different charitable organizations X number of starting bibs. So those people, for the most part, are not qualified runners, but you know, the folks up front have qualified by virtue of time. So it's a mix of qualified and charity runners for the most part. I used to produce the start line for Channel 5. I mean, I did it for 20 years, and it was the only organized start was the elite runners. So the rest, everybody else was. Somebody else way back in the pack could have had a faster time, but you'd never know because there was no way, you know, to start your clicker or anything. Now, do they start the charity groups all together, or how does that work? They do, but they start behind all the qualified runners, and the qualified runners are all seeded according to qualifying times. So the fastest are up front, that elite crowd in the start in the front, and then the fastest qualifying times all the way back to the slowest qualifying times, and then behind them lined up are the charity runners. And then, of course, this year they've expanded that because of the non-finishers from last year. So they've gone from the year last year, the field was about 27,000 runners. This year it's 36,000 because of for lots of different reasons. Maybe 4,000, I think, of the non-finishers from last year are there. But they've opened it up for other people too to be running for the symbolic reasons. Well, what about? I mean, Diane is one, Dana-Farber, but are there others in your group didn't get to finish? Are they sentimental about that, or they just want to get to the finish line in order to raise money for the cause? Well, it's both. I think you know, it's you know, we have about 200 people coming back from last year's team that didn't get to finish, who came back, and the BAA gave them entries into this year's race with no obligation. They didn't have to run for the charitable organization that they were part of the year before. It was totally up to them. So we have almost 200 of the 300 plus who didn't get to finish from our team last year who came back, and that shows their commitment, like with Diane, to raising money for a worthy cause. In our case, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, and 100% of our runners raised money goes to the Claude Adams Bar program at Dana-Farber that funds young scientists who are new to the game and can't get NIH funding or whatever. So it's a very unique fund. That's an inspiration right there. All right, Jack Fultz, thanks so much for coming.